Wire shelving like this usually comes with shelving liners that are typically made from, a plastic material. It's flexible, and it's just meant to provide a little bit of support in case you want to put something small down and you don't want it to fall through the cracks in between the wires. So that's actually pretty useful, and it doesn't look too bad. When I look at this, I'm like, yeah, this is okay. I mean, I could be fine with that. The problem is, if you're trying to go for something a little bit more better looking, or something a bit more functional than this, if you want like something like wood here, something solid where anything can lay on top of it and it's not going to poke through the little holes, the little gaps in between things, like it can with plastic, then you're going to have to do what I did, which is make wooden shelf liners. And I made these out of MDF sheet. So I just used 1/4 inch MDF, and then I lined it with kind of like a jewelry box velvet material that my kid really loved. This is actually for my kid's playroom. So she wanted hot pink, and that's what she got. You'll see that in a second. So the first thing you're going to have to do is figure out what kind of wood you want. And I went with medium density fiberboard, which you can see here. And I used 1/4 inch. There it comes in all kinds of thicknesses, but if you use 1/4 inch, you'll probably be fine. You can go with an 1/8 inch if you're not too worried about what you're going to put on top of it. But an 1/8 inch of fiberboard will have some flex to it, whereas the 1/4 inch will not. The 1/4 inch just lays on top and is very firm there. You could choose a hardwood as well, and that's a pretty good option if you want to just put hardwood on there. You can even stain it if you wanted instead of upholstering it, like I did. I used upholstery on mine, which you'll see later on. Uh, but you could even just use a hardwood, stain it however you want, and it would look good. But the problem with the hardwood is that it's going to cost more. First of all, that's not a big cost, but it'll cost more, and it is going to be harder to work with when you're cutting this at home, which you're going to have to do, and you're sanding down parts of it. It's just going to require a lot more effort to work with a hardwood than it will work with MDF fiberboard. Um, and you'll see some of the things that you have to do later on. So the next thing to do is to select your wood. And I just went on to Home Depot's website and ordered myself 15 total uh, MDF sheets. And you just have to make sure you're ordering the right dimensions. Get your dimensions right. So measure your wire shelving and make sure you're getting something at least as big. You'll be cutting it, so it has to be at least as big as the shelves. Okay, now that you have your wooden panels, what you're going to need to do is cut them. And the problem is, uh, if you don't get the cuts exactly right, you're going to have to go back and redo it. And it's almost impossible once you've cut them once. You can't use a saw then to cut them again for just shaving off a millimeter or two. Instead, you'll use a planer or something like a hand planer or something, and it really gets to be annoying. So you should try to make your cuts perfect from the start. That means you have maybe a millimeter or two on each width and length before you screw up. So no pressure, but yeah, I think if you use a table saw, it's going to be much easier than using a circular saw. Circular saws, even with a track option that you can use with a circular saw, it just, the accuracy is just not there unless you're really good using it. Table saws will be a good amount more accurate. And I found that I was just able to get it perfect the first time, and I didn't have to go back and redo anything. But I just used a simple table saw like this. This is an introductory table saw from Skill. Comes highly reviewed and highly recommended. One other thing, I failed to mention why you need to cut it at home yourself. Why couldn't you just go to Home Depot and say, here are my dimensions, cut it for me there? Uh, and I kind of hinted at it. It's because of the precision you need. If you ask Home Depot to do it, or Lowe's, or wherever, they'll get you pretty close to what you want for your dimensions, but they're not going to care about a millimeter or two. They're not going to be that accurate. You have to be that accurate. So, unfortunately, unless you know the guy at Home Depot and he's friends with you, I would not do it. They're going to cut it plus or minus a half inch. And that's way too much margin on the cut you need. And the next thing you're going to have to do is get some Forstner drill bits. These are the ones that I got. They're pretty cheap, and they're used to make holes in things in wood, in particular. So what we're going to be using for them for is the corners of the sheets are going to need these kind of semicircular cutouts on the corners of the shelves that we create, because otherwise they're not going to fit into the wireframe shelving. The wireframe shelving has poles that go up and down the corners of everything. So to fit your wooden sheet onto there, it's going to need these little hole cutouts so that it just fits in really nicely. And so whatever the diameter of your poles are on your wire shelving, you'll go a little bit higher than that. So if it's 1 1/8 inch diameter, then you'll go 1 1/4 inch with your cutout, just to give you a little bit of extra room there. And it's not going to be perfect. So later on, you're going to need some wooden files to file it down as needed. Those corners are going to give you some problems later, just because it's almost impossible to get it aligned there and perfect. So so you're going to need some wooden files and do it by hand to file that down. So after you cut your sheets and notch out the corners and file those corners down, you're basically left with this. This is the almost finished product, and it's going to look a little rough, but that's okay because we're going to be adding upholstery to it next. Okay, so next is to select your fabric and buy it. And in my case, I bought this Decotalk adhesive backed velvet, and it has the same feeling as what you'd find in a jewelry box. Again, this is what my daughter wanted. She wanted hot pink and velvet, so I accommodated her. I originally wasn't even going to put any fabric on it, which is fine, but this looks a lot better. It feels better. You can choose whatever fabric you want to go with, or just even use any old contact paper or wallpaper, shelf liner, whatever you want, you can put on there. It's no big deal. You just have to make sure you measure everything properly. The shelves are pretty wide, so you have to get wider contact paper than maybe they have normally. So make sure you do your measurements properly. Okay, so here I am just sort of measuring how long the whole roll is, and then I'm going to cut it up into individual pieces. Each piece will go onto each individual wooden shelf. And you have to make sure that you leave some margin around the width and length so that you can wrap it around the edge of the wooden shelf. The next thing you're going to have to do is cut out the corners of your fabric. You'll see why in a second. That's so that they form flaps that wrap around the edges of your shelf. So if you don't do that, then you get all kinds of wrinkles at the corners and everything. So that's just preparing for when you wrap it around. You'll see it in a second. Now we're going to need an ironing board, and we're going to place the wooden panel on top of the ironing board. this will be used to add the fabric to it. It just makes it a little easier. And here I'll show you all of the steps that I took to put on the fabric and wrap it around, press out the bubbles, and then notch the corners. You'll see that as we go. With the corner pieces, the adhesive comes together and you just press it together, and then you use little snips to snip out the corner circular section. So the snips that I used were just like a Swiss Army knife, a little tiny Swiss Army knife that I had. And you notice everything comes together really nicely. And here's what a finished shelf looks like. If you did it right, you won't have any visible bubbles and everything will fit nicely. What I didn't mention is that at some point after cutting it, you definitely want to make sure that it fits on the wireframe shelving before you add the upholstery. Make sure you do that. But if you've gotten to this point, it means that your shelves are looking good and they're now ready to add to your wireframe shelving. And here's the final product. You finally get to see everything all put together. And it took a while to do this. This is not a super easy project just because of how precise everything has to be, but it's doable for beginners. I'm a beginner. I think anybody can do this. And the shelves are actually much better than just those little plastic liners.